So do you want wet wood or not?
Is that going to be the intro? Do you want what wood?
I didn't know how to word it.
Of course you want wet wood, don't you, Randy? Welcome to Cue the Mic.
Welcome to Cue the Mic.
Episode 23.
23.
We thought we had a lot of conversations and a lot of messages from people listening that wanted to talk more about backyard barbecue.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're going to talk about barbecue for dummies, I thought it was pretty appropriate. We'd bring back Randy Twyford.
And it's nice to be here. Very nice. Appropriately marked. Thank you very much, Darren. Sure appreciate it, old buddy. You know.
Randy's no dummy. He brings a lot of intelligence to the barbecue world. And
boy, he's stroking it now.
It's just been a long time. And yeah, I know. It was a good intro.
Yeah, it was.
Right?
Oh, God.
We're going to have to shut off Emma's mic because she's going to be going, oh, my God.
Oh, my God. I can't believe
That's
they're saying
not true.
that.
Yep. See?
She'll do this
the whole time, Randy.
I thought 11 episodes between each Randy episode, or like between each Randy appearance would be enough, but I'm starting to second guess that decision already.
Oh, I tell you, Randy and I are both headed. He's coming down to visit me at Praise the Lord in Murfreesboro, in Illinois this weekend. So we're going to have a fun and frolicking weekend.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Exciting weekend. And Who knows? We might even just pull out the mic and call Emma up and say, come on, hit the record. Let's go.
Live from Murfreesboro.
The capital of Illinois.
Barbecue capital of Illinois.
Oh, barbecue capital of Illinois.
Get that straight, Darren.
Sherry just walked in the back door and she's being very quiet. But she thinks we just started. But, honey, we just started, so we got a good hour to go. She's grabbing her book and heading off to the exercise bike.
There you go.
Right on.
Okay.
But yeah.
So what are we going to talk
about?
Barbecue
for dummies.
Well, I think it's, I get asked a lot of questions. You get asked a lot of questions. We all get a lot of questions as professional barbecuers. So I thought it would be okay just to kind of try and hit some high level of, talk about different types of cookers. And there's always wood versus charcoal versus pellets and what type of meat and tell me about the cooking process. And do I wrap and butcher? Do I not? So I thought it would be kind of okay just to go through the process as if we were going to kind of cook the meat ourselves.
I agree.
And talk about, because Randy and I probably have, differing opinions.
Well, and I agree
why
with
we
you.
Do things the way we do it.
I agree with you. I mean, I think it's a lot that we take for granted. But I mean, I'm like yourself. How many times we'll be out with a food truck or out with a catering, and somebody's like, "How do you cook a pork butt?" That's something that's just comes natural for you or I, but for the average person, it's like, or I've cooked this brisket and it was so tough. Well, what temperature do you pull it at?
You hear that all the time.
I pulled it at 160 degrees. Oh, okay. So stuff that you and I think is pretty basic. Go ahead.
Right. So we're going to try and roll back and just kind of go back to the basics, because I think there's a lot of gold there to be mined. That and if you're a competition barbecue cook, we'll probably still give out some secrets along the way. You might be a little boring, but just stick with us. This podcast is for everybody.
That's exactly right.
Right. Well, and even if they are, if they are competition barbecuers, it'd be kind of interesting to see if they agree with the stuff you say. So
And if they don't, they can get their
maybe
own.
you
just
do
to
listen
hear
to
Randy
it,
and I-
and then you let us
Yeah,
know.
yeah. They can get their own friggin' podcast, and they can make their own opinion. But today it's Darren and I's. Sorry.
Well, and Emma.
And Emma, excuse me.
And Emma Randa. Yeah, right.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I have an opinion.
Anyway.
Come on.
Okay. So anyway, let's go to type of cookers, because I get asked that a lot about offset versus indirect versus drums versus pellet cookers, whatever. And so I started cooking on a little electric Brinkman smoker. And I had no idea that temperature meant anything, right? If smoke was coming out of the top of it, it meant you were smoking.
I actually started
And
on
then
I actually started on a offset, I think, from Walmart. One of the barrel offset deals, and couldn't figure out why I couldn't keep heat in it. I kept chucking
because
wood
it was
in
made of 16-inch steel. Yeah.
Yeah, made out of just a little heavier than a beer can, and kept chucking wood to it, and it'd go to 300 degrees and then drop to 20, back and forth.
Right. And I think that's part of the problem with, people trying, of course, when they're just getting started, they don't want to invest a lot of money.
Sure.
Right. So they're trying to find the cheapest thing possible. So like the electric Brinken, somebody gave it to me. Right. Now I quickly moved off to an Oklahoma Joe's I guess it's Horizon, was Oklahoma Joe's offset, but it was 1/4-inch steel thick. So it was okay to manage a fire, but the higher dollar you're going to invest, I would say the easier it is to manage the fire. Right, because managing a fire is the hardest part.
You guys are talking about how thick they are. Is that out of importance? Like, do you want such a thick steel?
Super important. It's an insulation deal. So like on my Jambo, top of the line competition cooker, I've got 4 inches of insulation around my firebox. So I mean, I can run that thing on just a few charcoal briquettes if I want, and one stick of wood, and it'll still maintain temp because it's very efficient. But if you get a cooker that doesn't have any insulation at all around it, or the steel isn't very thick, you lose all the heat. The heat doesn't go into the chamber. It goes out through the steel of the firebox. And you get drafts coming in and seal tight, and then so you just back and forth. So it's really tough. So if you're going to buy an offset, get a thicker one, right? You got to get something that's a 1/4-inch thick or better, I would say. Don't try and buy something that, is on sale. Just you get what you pay for when it comes to barbecue cookers.
You want my opinion? I get asked this all the time.
Yeah.
I get asked this all the time. What kind of I'm going to just cook backyard stuff. I want to grill. I want to smoke. What should I get? And we never talked about this before, but I recommend a Big Green Egg. I think they're the most versatile cooker out there, smoker there is for a backyard person. They're not something we're going to use on a commercial basis. And we used to do it on the competition, and we pretty well busted it every time we take it down the road. But for the backyard guy, you can take and you can grill on it. You've never had a better steak. Or you can set it and you can smoke a brisket in it for 12, 14 hours and not have to babysit it. I think the Big Green Egg they're not that far out of line in price. They're cheaper than one of these offset Brinkmans. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to take the opposite approach. Because I think that's horrible. I think that's horrible advice.
You do.
This is going to be fun.
And Randy knows this because I had a Big Green Egg. It sat on my deck for 4 years, custom cart, all kinds of nice stuff. But what I don't like about the Big Green Egg, it's very efficient. Okay, so it's made out of clay or ceramic or whatever, ceramic.
Or as Grandpa
so it's
Cheese
very
said,
insulated. It's
same thing out of toilets made.
It was like a toilet, right? But what I don't like is the Big Green Egg the airflow in the big green egg is designed around building a small fire, and snuffing that fire out to maintain temperature. So by snuffing that fire out, to me, it does make it really efficient. It'll last for a long time. It'll burn for days. But I don't like the intense smoke flavor. Now, if you want intense smoke flavor, it's the thing for you. But I just don't like the airflow in the big green egg. I think somebody would be way happier to go grab, a Traeger or some sort of pellet cooker.
Oh, I agree.
And have the versatility
I agree with you
to do
on that. But I think, I don't know.
He agrees.
I don't know whether I do or not. Well, also on that green egg, maybe it's the operator not knowing how to set the dial on the top to be able to get the right airflow.
It very well could be.
It
very well could be.
Just saying.
If you ever want some fun, go out and go to YouTube and type in big green egg flare-ups.
Oh yeah,
and you'll watch, because you shut the oxygen to those things down too much, that if you don't give it a little burp, it will flash back.
Oh, it's unbelievable
on you. I mean, it'll singe your eyebrows.
Yeah.
I mean, Randy used to have hair.
Yeah. That's why I don't cook on that much anymore. So, what was that, Emma?
Well, I was always standing next. She wanted to know what my excuse was.
That's what I thought she said. Just confirming it.
So anyway, Randy likes a big green egg. I like for the backyard guy, I like a pellet. I'm not a fan of the offset. I mean, if you can get a thick metal one, it's okay, but it depends what you want to do. If you're a guy that wants to sit around and tinker with the fire every 15 or 20 minutes,
exactly,
get an offset, okay? And because you're going to have to control it every 15 or 20 minutes. A big green egg, you're going to let a big green egg will go for hours on end. A pellet cooker will go indefinitely if you keep filling it full of pellets. And you think from a smoking standpoint that you want to sit there and do that every 15 or 20 minutes, that gets really old really quick. Ultimately what you're after is the end product, right? You're after, hey, I want to have barbecue for dinner. I want to invite friends over. But if you need to, especially on an overnight cook, if you got to stay up all night and check that thing, that's just horrible. It's just, you may think you want to go there. You don't.
You'll do it once.
You'll do it once. And so let's go back to the offset. So, and I imagine Randy's offset was the same as mine. So in order to be smoking, you had to smoke. So you got fuel. So you got a choice. You can do wood, you can do charcoal, you can do pellets. Or propane. You can do propane, but that's cheating. So we're not even going to talk about propane. Right? It's cheating until you get to commercial operation, right?
There you go.
Okay. But I'm not wood versus charcoal. So different types of woods. One of the they talk about woods. They always say in order for a wood to be good for smoking, it has to have a fruit or a nut on it. So the tree so a cherry tree is fine. A hickory tree or an oak or something like that, but you're not going to use a pine because it doesn't have a fruit or a nut. You can get by with apple, and it all depends on how much smoke flavor you want, right?
Do you really think that the difference between like a cherry wood and a peach wood, and that actually imparts a different flavor to the meat?
I'm not going to say I don't think it's a different flavor, but I think it's a different level of smoke.
What do you mean by that?
That's kind of interesting.
Well, so in the restaurant, we're known, if you go to Texas for barbecue, you're going to get post oak, right? And post oak is a pretty harsh oak wood. You come to Smokey D's, you're going to get cherry wood. Okay. Right. So cherry wood, and the main reason we use cherry wood because it's very mild. Now, people that want a lot of smoke flavor, they'll complain. But for the most part, if you want delicate smoke, then you want to use something like a cherry wood or whatever. Now you can move up and like in competition, I'll use like pecan or hickory. Cherry doesn't leave a good coal base, so as you're burning it, you kind of burn through it quicker. It doesn't have a lot of. One thing important if you're dealing with an offset cooker is your coal base is very important. So think about when you're sitting around a campfire and you throw a log on it, it smokes. And then once it's all the way, you see it start to break apart. And those coals are what keep that fire going and keep it very efficient. And that's really what you're trying to do. And that's why, sometimes in the South, you see where those guys are burning down wood and then the charcoal kind of falls down and they take their shovel and they go put it underneath
have a barrel
or whatever.
Pre-burn.
So that's a very, that's a very mellow smoke because you've kind of burnt all the impurities, if you will, out of the wood. So
let me ask you this.
It's different levels of smoke.
Let me ask you this. Do you think leaving the bark on the wood has anything to do with the flavor of the smoke or anything? Or
that's a good question.
I think it does, and I think the bark burns differently. It tends to smolder.
Okay.
And so smoldering wood tends to put off a lot more smoke. So in essence, when you're looking at smoke, and when Randy and I first started, I guarantee we could open up our smokers and it would just be glossy black, dripping with creosote. And that's really what that was creosote. So you're burning a very inefficient fire. It's smoking a lot. And when you're smoking a lot, it's creating creosote. So as you smoke something, and we'll get into meat later, but meat only takes that smoke for a certain period of time. And once after that certain period of time, the meat's not going to take any smoke flavor on. But if you keep throwing the smoke to it, you're just building, creosote on the outside of the meat, so it's like kissing somebody that smokes. Right?
Sure.
That flavor.
Sure.
Randy, are you lost or?
No, I'm just listening. I'm just listening.
So anyway, I mean, but it's a very tart flavor, and some people think that's good. I think it's horrible. I mean, we have a restaurant to the north of us that is very, very popular that I'll go to about once every 3 or 4 years, right? And I walk in this place and they're heavy on the hickory smoke. And when you walk in, and all you can smell is this hickory, which it smells good. But when you get your food, the way you determine how much smoke on food is when you get done eating, how many hours you belch smoke afterwards.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
Because that's really the true.
Nasty.
Because if you get somebody that oversmokes something, you'll be belching for 12 hours afterwards, and all she'll do is. But that's what it is.
That's
hey,
wild.
I got a question for you. I mean, speaking of the wood, going back to the wood and the smoldering, you hear a lot of people. And I've been asking. I'm sure you have. Should we soak our wood chunks before we cook them? We'll put them in the fire pit. So what's your thoughts of soaking wood in water before you put it on in the fire?
Well, here's my point. If you're buying, I'm not a fan of wood chips soaking them. It's just going to create nasty smoke.
Soaking your wood in
so
water.
Wood chunks. It depends. It depends. If you got wood chunks that have been sitting there for 5 years in the damn garage that are all dried out and brittle, a little water's not going to help. Not for very long, but to bring some moisture out, because that wood is really going to burn well. So if you can be fancy like we used to be, we're not anymore, but we used to take moisture meters and we would dry all our wood down to 10 to 12%. Right. So the outside, if I put a moisture meter like a woodsmith would, they would kiln dry their wood down to 10 or 12%.
Right.
Yeah. Woodchuck wood. Right. Yeah. But they would do that. And so we did that in competition barbecue. Well, then you get good enough that you can either knock two pieces of wood together and tell whether they're dry or not, to now you can just pick it up and toss it in your hand and know whether it's a wet piece of wood or a dry piece of wood, and so like when we're in competition, what?
So do you want wet wood or not?
Is that going to be the intro? Do you want what wood?
I didn't know how to word it.
Of course you want wet wood, don't you, Randy? No, just kidding. Okay, we're back. We're back. Okay, we're back. I know. She went there. But no, so I think you want wood with. I don't think you want super dry wood.
Okay.
I think you don't. Super dry wood's just going to burn and give you no flavor whatsoever.
It's just going to go up
it's just going to be gone. Whereas if you have wood that measures in that 10 to let's say 15% even moisture content, it's going to burn. The outside's going to burn, and as it gets hot, the inside's going to be wetter. And it's going to continue to burn, and it will dry it out, and it will last a lot longer. If you get it too wet, it's going to have trouble igniting, and it's just going to sit there and smolder. And that smoldering is what we're trying to avoid. That's what bark brings. That's whatever. So, do I tell everybody, hey, do you run out and get a moisture meter? Probably not. Okay, even though you can get them for $12, $13, if you're into it, get into it. But I think it's just being able to realize if you buy a new bag of wood versus an old bag of wood and look at the difference, and you'll figure out if it's too dry, you're not going to get much smoke flavor at all. Now, it's okay to use that as fuel, but you don't want to keep chucking wood all the time, because if you keep chucking wood and the wood is smoking, you're just adding creosote to your fire. So I always tell people, if I've got an indirect cooker, just start with a little base of charcoal and put a stick of wood on, and then maybe add some more lump charcoal or another piece of wood. But, at some point it just becomes fuel. So wood's a lot more expensive. Well, it used to be a lot more expensive than charcoal. I think it's probably the other way around now. But, so it's all about clean smoke. When I'm looking at a smoker, I don't want to see smoke coming out of it. Now, when you first light it, yes, there's going to be, but you don't want meat on there when you first light it. But ultimately, you're looking for a thin blue haze coming out of that smoker. You don't even want to be able to tell that smoker's operating. If you're chugging smoke, you need to get a cleaner fire. You need to get a hotter fire. You need a cleaner fire. No, right, because you're over smoking stuff. Charcoal. Some people like charcoal. I use charcoal in competition. I actually use charcoal briquettes to start the fire because they provide a really good coal base. Now, why the charcoal starting, I don't have any meat on the smoker, but I like to put charcoal and then put wood on the top of it. So the charcoal will get the wood burning, I get the wood smoke, and then I can either add a log or I can add some more lump charcoal. So you got charcoal briquettes, which are molded. Some of them are all natural. I think Royal Oak has an all natural one, where some of the other players add clay and different impurities into that charcoal to fillers to get it to bind together, right? And that doesn't necessarily create the best smoke. And it's okay. I mean, it's not really a health issue, but it's really a flavor issue. So if you're burning on for instance, a Weber grill, we don't talk about the Weber enough. It's probably the most versatile grill. I'd take a Weber grill on my deck to smoke and to grill over a big green egg any day.
Yeah.
Because you can create an offset fire. It's very efficient. But you don't want to throw the steak on when the coals aren't, when they're still black, because it's just going to create this nasty flavor.
What about, speaking of charcoal, what about using that charcoal that you can light it itself? Is that any good to use? You can just light
I like it for my solo stove.
No,
I like it for my solo stove.
But no, I'm talking about for on a grill. If I'm going to be grilling.
You're talking about, I have no problem with that matchlight charcoal.
Okay. Yeah.
If you wait until it's 100% engulfed in flames.
Okay.
I mean, if you can't smell charcoal fluid coming out, it's fine. I mean, shit,
Okay.
there's famous barbecuers, Donnie Teal, Johnny Trigg. Those guys used to just throw a bag of charcoal in there and just take a whole bottle of lighter fluid and spread it on there and throw a match at it and get the pit going real quick. And they've won many world championships doing that.
Sure.
But they weren't throwing the meat on. So matchlight charcoal, you want to use matchlight? People say,
Okay.
oh, it's bad. No, it's not bad. You just got to make sure it's all the way lit and all the way burning and burnt all the, the charcoal, the lighter fluid, because that's all it is.
Yeah.
You got to make sure that lighter fluid's all burned off of there before you put a piece of meat on it.
Sure.
So, never put a piece of meat on a smoker that's got smoke rolling out of it. If when you open that door and it's in your eyes and that smoke's going to hurt your eyes, don't put that meat on. Get a cleaner fire, put it on. Trust me, you'll get a good clean smoke versus a dirty smoke, and your flavor is going to be so much better.
Sure. What you kind of alluded also there to lump charcoal. What's your thoughts on lump charcoal as compared to briquettes, or what is lump charcoal?
Well, I use so lump charcoal. All it is they take logs, or they take 2x4s or whatever. It depends what company it is. But they take it and they put it in these big burn barrels and they throw furnace and they start burning that wood. And then it gets to a certain point and they snuff it out. They just cut off all the oxygen and they snuff it out. And then they snuff it out until the fire is completely out, and then they dump it out. And so now you've got pre-charred wood. So when we talked about wet wood versus dry wood and whatever, it's partially burned wood, and it's mainly burnt all the way through, but it works really well. You can add that to an existing fire, and it's not going to create a lot of smoke to an existing fire. Matter of fact, today, with the Jambo, I've found that a lot easier, so instead of managing the fire every 20 or 30 minutes by putting a log on, I can actually start with a bag of briquettes, put a log on top with maybe a little bit of lump charcoal. I can light it, get that going, rolling good. And then every time I put meat on, I'll just throw a log on 10 minutes before, make sure that log's burning clean. And then if I just want to maintain the fire, I've just got a pan there that I dump out some lump charcoal and put it on the side of the fire. And it really doesn't smoke because it's already been pre-burned. And it gives me a good fuel source that has a lot of lasting power.
And clean.
And a clean one. So, I mean, just for instance, when I'm cooking a competition, if I get up and light the pit at 4:00 in the morning and I'm done with the pit about 1:30 in the afternoon, I'm going to go through one bag of briquettes. I'm going to go through a full bag of lump, and I'm going to go through about 6 or 7 sticks of wood on a Jambo. So I think the important takeaway is it's okay to add lump charcoal. Don't add briquettes if you got meat on the. Briquettes are a good starter. And they're good for grilling steaks and stuff, but you got to make sure they're burning all the way before you put stuff on. Otherwise, you're not going to like the results.
Okay.
Then pellets. I'm a pellet fan. I'm a big pellet fan. I've probably got 15 pellet cookers in my arsenal.
You always have been.
I started out competition on pellet, and just it's I've been called a cheater many times, but does it impart a lot of smoke flavor? No, but it's super easy. I mean, if I want to throw something on the pellet cooker and just let it go all day long, very rarely do you have a problem. Right. Now, there's these guys today that, every pellet cooker, it wants to do more than my computer does, right? They want to monitor every single temp and pellet feed and whatever. Just throw the shit on there. I've got some of the fanciest American-made pellet cookers out here, and they got all this Wi-Fi shit on it and monitor your temp. You know what? If you're smoking, goddamn it, be out near there, right? And if I'm not going to get up every 2 hours and check on a pellet cooker, right?
Right.
But the more electronics, the problems become the electronics, not the augers and everything. And But pellet cookers to me are a fine solution. I was just watching. I was on TikTok last night, if you can imagine that.
No.
First time in 2 days, and I went out there and there was this video I had shot out at Snake River cooking a backyard brisket. And if you haven't checked that out, go to TikTok and just look up Snake River Farms. And I did a backyard brisket. And I tell you what, I cooked it on I think that was a Green Mountain grill because that's what they had there. And no injection on a brisket. No, it was a good, halfway decent quality brisket. It wasn't the best brisket I'd ever cooked. But man, I put that on that pellet cooker and cooked it for, I don't know, maybe 5.5 hours total. Took that off, let it rest for 3 hours. It is the juiciest brisket I've ever cooked in my life. And it never got injected. It never got anything, but it was just an amazing. Did it have a lot of smoke flavor? No. But I think there's definitely a place.
What pellets, what flavor of pellets do you recommend people to use?
Well, I mean, I like blends. I mean, people think that pellets add different flavors.
What do you mean blend?
Well, so you can buy, if you go buy a cherry pellet,
right?
It's not just cherry. They got to add oak in there because pellets require BTUs.
Okay.
So you got to have firepower, right? And that's what's holding it. So every pellet is a blended pellet, right? So even if you got a hickory pellet, chances are it's hickory and oak. Now, if you're buying like a Traeger pellet out in the Northwest, it might be something of a wood that's closest to them, plus hickory or whatever. So lots of variations, but pellets don't I have a Bear Mountain pellet that I love. It's easy for me to get. I use a gourmet blend, so it's blended hickory and oak and cherry, but it's a clean pellet. When it comes, it's not crumpled into it. The bag's not full of dust. It burns in virtually any pellet smoker I have.
Okay.
Without, thing. Now some pellets come and they've been tossed around in so much and they're little things and it's just hard. Or some pellets are way too long. I've had pellets before that are way too long and then they jam up augers and stuff. So I don't know. I like Bear Mountain. There's a bunch of good pellets out there. Not that Traeger has a bad pellet or whatever. It's just, they had them on sale for $7 over Labor Day weekend. I backed up the truck. Did the old Laney Wilson.
Where do you buy them? Where do you buy them at?
I buy them at Fleet Farm.
Okay, Fleet Farm.
Or you can buy them at Baumgar's. Fleet Farm or Baumgar's or pretty easy pellet to find and a pretty expensive. Now, I tell you, when we first started out, old Phil Hopkins taught me how to cook on a pellet cooker because he had smoking guns and he cooked totally on pellet cooker. That boy used heating pellets. That's all he ever used was oak heating pellets. And hell, they were oak heating pellets.
Really?
And you could buy them for $2.99 a bag. Tell you what, you ain't gonna be able to tell the difference. You ain't gonna be. It's all about marketing, right? Right. That's what the pellet world's about. That's what the barbecue world's about. It's all about marketing. And so, I love old Meat Church Matt. I love him to death, but his pellet, I walk in there and fuck it, $13 more expensive than I ain't buying that. I'll just send you $10.
There you go.
Right? Does it make it any superior? No. Most of these are, like charcoal. There's only 3 places in America, I think, that make charcoal.
They're making them, yeah.
It all comes out of the same damn thing, and they just get a different label. And I think that's true in all of barbecue. I think it's true whether you're talking about, wood sources, whether you're talking about charcoal sources, whether you're talking about pellets or whatever. There's so many of these manufacturers around.
Sure.
It's like the old Twyford barbecue sauce used to be, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Moving right along.
Old Twyford barbecue sauce.
Moving right along.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So anyway, wood, charcoal, pellets, it's just a matter. Just run a clean fire. Yeah. I think that's the whole thing. Get to a point where you can run a fire. Forget about putting meat on your smoker. Just try and run your smoker and keep its temperature consistent. You don't want to be bouncing around from 300 to 200 to whatever. Try and get where you can hold 250 or 275 or 300. It doesn't matter. And just try and hold the temperature. It doesn't have to be exact, but just try and keep it in the range and maintain and do your practice that way versus ruining a piece of meat.
Okay.
And speaking about meat, What's your favorite thing to cook, Randy?
I like cooking briskets and ribs.
Briskets and ribs.
If I had my rather, I would rather probably mess with ribs or brisket. Excuse me, brisket.
Right, but most people shy away from that because that's the last thing the backyarders want to do is because they don't want to screw up $100 piece of meat. It used to be a cheap piece of meat, and now it's not. I mean, $100. She looks at $100 as I cook $250 briskets every weekend, and she's looking at me like, "What?"
But I can't say I don't. I like.
That's absurd.
Yeah. I like cooking ribs also. And the thing I like about ribs is it's a quick and easy cook, or somewhat quick, depending on what temp you're running them at.
Yeah.
And it's as
3 or 4 hour cook.
Yeah, as of a brisket, if you're going to do it right, you're going to cook them overnight. Now, I know you disagree with that, but cooking them hot and fast. But
I think there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. There's no such thing as wrong. Why a cat? See, you grew up in a different generation.
You've never heard of there's more than one way to skin a cat? Oh,
yeah.
God.
I feel it.
I mean, it's kind of like
I feel like I have heard it, but
it's like opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one.
I have heard that one
worse than others,
plenty of
except
times.
for that one guy we graduate. Oh, never mind. That's a whole different story.
Jesus.
But I think ribs are a quicker.
She says she sure says Jesus a lot. You'd think this is a church thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Every week, Jesus. You know when you've said something wrong or controversial when I get the old Jesus.
She says that a lot when I'm on here, doesn't she? But I think ribs are a nice cook. And people like cooking ribs.
Ribs are a nice cook. I think most people want to start with pork and the pork butt because it's very forgiving. Okay. It's hard to screw up a pork butt. I mean, it really is. And I think that's where I would suggest people cut their teeth. Yeah. One of the things I think that people see, oh, what am I going to do with this 11-pound piece of meat? Well, what they don't understand is 11-pound piece of meat's only going to be 5.5 pounds by the time you get done. But still, it's an 11-pound piece of meat. But it's just a piece of meat. I mean, if it's too big, cut it in half. Cut it in half raw and cook half of it and throw the rest of it in the freezer. There's nothing wrong with that.
The only thing about doing a brisket or doing a pork butt, you got to be able to hold the temperature, for a long period of time. You better have got that down, or you're going to just screw it up.
Well, but if you're on a pellet, if you're on a pellet cooker, doesn't matter. If you turn up the temperature, doesn't matter. I cook a brisket in 4 hours and 10 minutes every single weekend. Right. So it's, I can cook a brisket as fast or as slow as you want to be, and there's virtually no difference in the end product.
Exactly.
Right. So,
but you've got a little experience.
Don't let that be your. I do, but it's the same thing. I mean, it's the same process. But when it comes to meat, okay, we'll talk about meat and then we'll talk about the cooking process. So when you talk about meat, fattier meats are better, right? So if you're looking something in the case,
why is that?
Looking at a pork butt, you want it. Well, because if you're barbecuing it, you want that internal marbling, which is that little striations of fat through the center.
Right.
And we don't care about the fat on the outside. I really don't care about the fat on the outside because you're either going to trim it off or you're going to take it off after it's cooked. It's okay to have some fat on the outside, don't get me wrong, but what you're really after on any piece of meat is the striations of fat on the inside. So I can go to Walmart and I can pick you out a winter brisket just by the striations of meats, and maybe we'll throw a Emmett or editing thing. We'll give her a little thing where people could see meat marbling. I'll get her some examples she can post up there about, non-marbled versus marbled meat. Make sure you make a note of that. Marbled versus non-marbled meat. And marbled meat, what happens is that striations of fat as you cook is going to melt into the meat, right? And when it melts into the meat, it's going to create juicy meat. Whereas if it doesn't have any internal marbling, it's going to come out drier than a popcorn fart. Can't believe we didn't get a Jesus on that one.
I can't either.
I've heard that one before.
She's getting numb. But usually, I used to say the cheapest cuts of meat were the best for barbecue. But that's not necessarily nothing's cheap anymore.
Right.
That's a fact.
But if you want to play with the pork butt, I was in the grocery store the other day. How most of them sell these little collars. It says a pork butt or whatever, and it's a little 2-3 pound piece of meat. It's going to turn out the same. Don't cook it for 15 hours. But it's the same piece of meat, just a little bit cut off and netted up. So don't be scared of that. But ribs everything's relatively, once you learn how to do it, barbecue is relatively easy, right?
I agree.
It's
the same process.
Cooking process. It's the same process for everything you do. So, there's the cooking process. So old Joe Cordray, who used to be the guy in charge of the meat lab at Iowa State University.
Oh, yeah.
Old Joe, he was smart son of a bitch when it come to meat. And, he taught me that, hey, meat starts out with a dry cooking process. So when you have a dry, I don't mean dry, but I mean dry heat. So you're dealing with dry heat. So as you're blowing charcoal across meat or wood or whatever, it's a dry process. So you've put some rub on the meat and it's creating this bark, right? And so at this point, the meat's taking on smoke. But in order to make that meat really tender, in a backyard scenario, I would say that it's not the case in commercial rotisseries and stuff. But then you need to wrap that meat to then bring moisture and to bring almost steam to the meat. So what you're trying to do is you take a dry heat and develop your bark, and then you wrap and you bring in moist heat, which then steams and stews and braises, maybe is the word, that meat to make it tender. So you get your flavor in the first part and you get your tenderness in the second part of the cook. And,
sure.
So we see that a lot, most of the time when I'm cooking really anything, if I'm wrapping it, I'm not going to go any more than 2.5 hours probably before I wrap something. Really? And people would say 2.5 hours, I go overnight. And you can go overnight at a very low temperature. And they would say that you're slowly rendering out that fat. Well, even in a hot and fast scenario, I don't think there's a piece of meat on this planet that I couldn't cook in under 5 hours.
And you're going to wrap it in 2.5.
I'm going to usually wrap it 2 to 2.5. Right now in competition, I'm wrapping those ribs in an hour and a half.
Okay.
What are you wrapping?
So you two types of wrap. You're either wrapping in foil or butcher paper, and that's a question. Boy, it is raining. It's monsooning here again in Iowa.
Well, that's
for
nice.
My friends in Arizona. I can't hardly hear those, so I'm going to have to. It's raining so hard. I live in a metal building, so it's probably not the best. What is it? How many week whatever of not having a podcast studio?
23.
Week 23 of not having a podcast studio. But anyway, so the main difference between the foil and the butcher paper, okay? Mm-hmm. Butcher paper is going to allow steam to permeate, right?
Okay.
So think of it as more of a gentler wrap, if you will. So
Okay.
If I wrap something in foil and I put liquid or even no liquid, it's going to start building a steam. That's all you're doing. You're steaming that meat, you're braising it, and you're making it tender. So, and a lot of times in competition, we wrap in foil because we want to add things to the wrap. So we have a brisket wrap, which may be a beef broth and may have some other ingredients in it. If we're wrapping pork, we're probably going to put brown sugar and honey and butter and all kinds of stuff in there. And that stuff's going to melt, and it's just going to sit there and braise in that liquid, and some of that meat's going to take on that flavor, right?
Right.
Whereas if you're in butcher paper, if I put beef broth in it, it's just going to leak out, right?
Right.
So, but as I build a bark cooking in wrapping in foil, that bark is going to kind of disintegrate somewhat and it's going to become kind of mushy rub again. Where if I'm wrapping in butcher paper and I'm not pounding it so hard with steam, then it's going to preserve some of that bark. So if you're after bark, if you're after a Texas style brisket, I would say go to butcher paper. If you're looking to speed up your cooking process, because it's going to take a lot longer to do it in butcher paper than, not maybe a lot longer, but it's going to take longer to, when you wrap something in butcher paper than if you wrap it in foil. If you want to get something done, foil is your friend. But there's some consequences. So there's good and bad to both of them.
Okay.
Let me ask you this. Is there any difference? I see people using the peach-colored butcher paper, and then you got the white butcher paper. Is there any difference between them that makes any difference in wrapping with?
Well, the purest, so white butcher papers had bleach added to it. So probably not a great scenario. Freezer paper has wax added to it. Probably not a great idea. So, one of two things. The peach butcher paper is really unbleached paper. That's its natural, even though I would say that's probably not its natural color. Its natural color is probably that of a grocery sack, right? But people, and you could just just go get a grocery sack and put your brisket in a grocery sack, right? And fold it up. You can do that. Well, some people say, but there's ink and there's glue on the handles and all that other stuff. So people are worried about shit like that. I don't. You're going to die somehow, right? So I don't get into that stuff too much. So, but peach butcher paper is kind of the in thing. That's what the professionals use. You can buy it logoed with ink that they tell you not to use. So they put ink all over it.
I've seen that. There you go with ink on it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's just butcher paper. I'm not worried about ink because guess what? When I take it out, the ink's still on there. So if the ink's still on there, evidently it's not in my meat, right?
And if you want a good source for it, Webstaurant, that online restaurant supply place, they got plenty of it, and it doesn't have ink on it, and the whole 10 yards.
That's Webstaurant.
Webstaurant? I call it
It's not Web Restaurant. But it's Webstaurant.
Webstaurant.
It's just like, it's like Web Restaurant, but it's one word, Webstaurant.
They have butcher.
And they are great. They are a great source. They got peach butcher paper. They got everything. They got everything. But that's really the difference between wrapping in foil, wrapping in butcher paper. There's no wrong or right. I saw some guys in a competition this weekend wrapping in butcher paper next to me, and they were pretty new. And I didn't say a word. I'm like, okay, yeah, they're wrapping in butcher paper. And I'm like, okay, but in competition barbecue, we have what we call the au jus, which when we get done cooking a pork or a brisket, we'll dump that liquid out into a fat separator and we'll separate out the fat, and we'll take that liquid and we'll use it as a finishing glaze, if you will, to bring more flavor into that meat. Well, if they're wrapping in butcher paper, they ain't got no finishing glaze.
Yeah,
they ain't got,
she's already went away.
They don't have that advantage of us trying to add flavors. So, I mean, if you do wrap in foil, and you're feeding, let's say, a pork butt, and you wrap that thing and you get some brown sugar and honey and butter, and you can put hot sauce, you can wrap it with beer, whatever flavor you want, doesn't matter. It's just got to be liquid, because that liquid's going to help create steam. And then when you do that, when you get done, don't throw that away. Take that and drizzle that over the top of that pulled pork. After you do it, it just gives it an amazing flavor.
Just kind of adds.
And if you don't want the fatty, then put it through a fat separator and get the fat off of it. And then, once you get the fat off it, pour it back over there, and just gives all kinds of great flavor.
Kind of as a gravy.
Yeah, a little bit. A little gravy, a little thinner, but. So, cooking. So we've cooked. We got our fire. We're managing our fire. We know what cuts of meat we're going to do. We know when we're going to wrap it. We talked a little bit about, we need to talk a little bit about tenderness, right? And I think this is where people screw up. What, did I say something funny?
No. Keep going.
You guys are both staring at me like, what that fucker just say?
No, you're totally fine.
You're fine.
Keep going.
Oh.
You didn't. For once, you didn't do anything.
Oh, you guys were just like, it must have been profound, because you guys were like staring at me like, holy shit, I can't believe he just said that.
No,
you
I
didn't
would
say anything.
I can't believe you said that. You know me better than that. So.
And I would say Jesus.
Right. Yeah.
And you would say along. Jesus.
Moving along.
Tenderness. Get yourself a probe. Get yourself it doesn't have to be a high dollar probe. You can I've been buying some of these $15 instant read probes on the internet, on Amazon. Mm-hmm. They last okay. Or you can get to ThermoWorks. They got a Thermopop, they got a Thermopen. So you can buy a probe from, $15 up to $100. And they both kind of do the same thing. I mean, some are calibrated a little more evenly, but that's the best way. Is you're cooking to a temperature, but then the feel of the probe has to really win out.
Yeah.
Right. So no matter what piece of meat you're cooking, it should feel, we always say, feels like butter. Well, it shouldn't feel like sticking a probe into butter. It should feel like if the probe was in butter and you're pulling it out of butter, the resistance. So sometimes the probe goes straight in because it's got a sharp point. Of course it goes straight in. But if you're pulling the probe out of your meat and the meat kind of sticks to it, or meat lifts up, you're not near even close to being done. Right. So, most of the time in almost all of barbecue, if you're talking about ribs or pork or brisket or anything like that, forget about USDA guidelines. If you got to cook pork to 145 or pork to be 160, that's out the table. If you're cooking a fatty piece of meat, I'm going to guess your finishing temperature is going to be somewhere between 195 and 210, 99% of the time. Right. Now, some cuts of meat, if they're not real fatty, you don't want to really go to the high end to get them super tender, because then they're just going to start drying out. So those, if I've got a brisket that's not fatty, I'm probably going to take that brisket to 202, 203. It's not going to be as tender, but I'll slice it thinner. If I'm cooking a Wagyu, like a Snake River Farms brisket, like I do in competition, I'm going to pound that thing. I'm going to 210, 211, because I know there's so much internal marbling there that it can take the heat, and I can push the tenderness.
I agree with you. If you're going to spend all your spend money to get this, that, and the other, do yourself a favor and spend a little money and get you a good thermometer, a good probe, so you know where you're at. Get your good
thermometer.
Because you got to know where you're at.
You got to know where you're at, but feel becomes the ultimate at the end.
Right.
Feel becomes the ultimate at the end, because, I mean, like, if anybody says they have a tough, chewy brisket, Yeah, if brisket was jerky, it's because you didn't cook it long enough. Right? Cook it longer. Wrap it in foil. Speed it up. Get it done. Right?
I agree.
And then resting. Once something's cooked, let it rest.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let it rest because
how long?
People. Well, it just depends what you're doing. So I tell you, one time I was out when I had a house in Arizona, I did a little test one day. And it was like 115 degrees outside. And here I am over this barbecue pit. And I was going to test ribs. So I cooked 3 racks of ribs. And when he got done, I did them in foil. They took my normal, I wrap them after an hour and a half, 2 hours, and they're done in an hour. So, ribs normally take me about 3.5 hours. And if I'm cooking at 275, 300, that's where they're going to finish. So as soon as they got done, I took them out and I sliced it and I took a bite of each rib, right? And then I wrapped it back up in foil and I let it sit for 20 minutes, threw a blanket over the top of it in a warm atmosphere. And I let it rest for 20 minutes. And I took off the next bone and I sliced it. They all got better, right?
Really?
And so then I wrapped them up and I let it go for 40 minutes. And I took it back out and I sliced a bone off. And it was like they got even better. And then I went for an hour and I did the same thing and I noticed no difference. So what that said to me was 20-minute rest was good on those ribs, but 40-minute rest was my ultimate. So like in competition, if I'm going to start screwing around and cutting up my ribs right after chicken, I want them ribs done at 11:15, 11:30 because I want them sitting on the counter in the juice, just resting. And, brisket, I would say rest as long as you can possibly rest it.
Get her
now,
off as
of
early
course,
as
you
you
need
can.
to get her off as early as you can. I mean, that's the beauty of barbecue. Everybody thinks that, oh my God, I got a family reunion. I got to get this done and whatever. And I'm not sure how I'm going to get this done at 5 and this done at 5:30. No, get it all done at 3 o'clock. Let it get all done at 2 o'clock. Just find a way to keep it warm. A styrofoam cooler is the best ever if you don't have a heated holding cabinet. But a styrofoam cooler, just taking your brisket, putting it in the bottom of a styrofoam cooler or any cooler, but styrofoam really has the best insulating power, I think. And you probably shouldn't put a brisket. I suppose I've done it before. Put brisket in your $500 Yetis, but if you got $500 to spend on a Yeti, then you might as well buy a bigger cooker.
And I've always heard take an old towel, like an old beach towel or something like that, and put that inside that cooler also to kind of hold that temperature in there, and you'd be good as gold.
Well, you want to fill it up. So you wrap it in a towel, but then we also take like newspaper and we just fill the cooler full of void, because if a cooler is full, not ice, but if it's full of anything, then it's going to maintain heat. Whereas if you don't have paper in there, and you can take some of that fancy butcher paper and do the same stuff, but if you put that in there, if you don't put it in there, then that meat, the heat off that meat has to heat up the inside of that cooler. Right. But if you take that cooler and put maybe some hot boiling water, or not boiling water right in the cooler, I wouldn't suggest that, but put a pan of hot water in there a half hour before your brisket's coming off, and then take that water out and dump it out. Now your cooler's warm. Put your warm brisket or your warm pork butt or whatever in there, cover it with a towel, cover it with paper, fill that thing clear full, and just let it rest. And, we do at Thanksgiving, and about 3 or 4 times a year, I love to cook turkey breast. And most people, if you were talking about smoking turkey breast, and it's a very lean cut of meat, but I would, most people would cook a turkey breast and they'd take it off and they'd put it on the cutting board and they'd slice it. Well, but you'd take it up to 165 because you have to, right? Right. But if you take a turkey breast 138 to 140 degrees, and you take that off the pit and throw a stick of butter on that thing or some melted butter on top of it and wrap it in foil, and then throw that in a cooler and let her sit for 3 hours full, it's the best damn turkey breast you've ever had.
I bet it is.
And if you've ever had Texas barbecue, that's their secret. So Texas barbecue, when you go to a Texas barbecue place and you see them cooking brisket today, That's not something they're serving today. That's tomorrow's. So they're cooking brisket all during the day. And tonight, they're going to take that brisket off and they're going to wrap it. They may wrap it partway through the cooking process. They may not, but they're going to take it off and they're going to let it sit. Remember when we did that old John Lewis when we we were down in Austin, Texas at, what's the name of the place? When he was at, we were at La BBQ.
Yeah, a barbecue.
And he showed us, they set those briskets all out on the picnic table. And they just let them sit because they wanted them to come down in temp. So they got them down to 150 degrees on the picnic table, and then they put them in a heating holding cabinet and held them at 145 all night long. And that's what they would serve the next day. So it was safe. You want to hold your meat above 140 degrees, to be USDA or to be health. You don't want to make anybody sick.
Right.
Right. So the health department. So you want 40 to 140 is bad, right? You don't want anything between 40 and 140 when you're holding. You want to be higher than 140. But so that's what Texas barbecue joints, that's why you get that velvety texture. That's why you get the slow cook stuff. But back to this turkey, you let that turkey sit for 3 hours. I've put a probe in it, and that turkey, if I take it at 138 and put butter on it and wrap it up tight, you'll just watch over a matter of an hour, hour and a half, it will rise up to 160, 162 degrees.
Really?
And it's just amazing, the finish. And people liken that to sous vide. But it's just amazing. So, you got to let it rest. You don't have to let it rest overnight. A lot of people aren't going to do that because you're not going to be able to throw a brisket in your cooler overnight and just let it sit there because it's gonna cool off enough.
It's gonna go down to 10.
And most ovens won't go down to 140, so you can't do it. Most pellet cookers and stuff you can't hold at 140. So most of the time in the backyard you're kind of screwed when it comes to that. But you can let that brisket rest for 3 or 4 or 5 hours, and it'll be fine. So if you're having a party, get that stuff done. Get it done. Get it in the cooler. Let it rest.
As an old guy that told me years ago that wore overalls, you're better off to have her holding it than to having to be pushing it at the end.
Right.
Old Dave Stamper. Yep.
God rest his soul.
Yep.
So, I don't know. That's barbecue. Barbecue in general is don't make it tough, right? It's super easy. Manage a good fire.
And I think, don't you think that's the thing? People try to make it too tough. They try to make it too tough.
They don't know how to they don't know how to manage a fire. And I wish I could do a podcast on how to manage a fire but it's kind of hard. Maybe we could do a YouTube video one of these times.
I'm waiting for it.
Oh, geez, I knew that was coming. But anyway, get a cooker that you can hold a steady temperature. Figure out how to manage a fire. Get a good quality piece of meat. Put whatever rub you want on top of it. It doesn't matter, right? I mean,
they're all good.
Start out simplistic. Start out with salt and pepper. They're all good. They're all bad. It's all, every barbecue rub in America is salt, sugar, paprika, garlic, onion. It's all the same. So find one you like. Pick the one with the fancy label. It doesn't matter. They're all the same.
Right.
In the end, it really doesn't matter, right? And just find something, beef rub. I love putting my brisket rubs on ribs. So if I'm cooking at home, I'm taking salt, pepper, and garlic that would normally go on brisket. I'm putting that on pork and ribs. Really? Just because it's just a different flavor, and I just love it. Yeah. But then go through the cooking process. You're going to cook it. You're going to wrap it. And then, think about dry heat versus moist heat. Once you wrapped it, then you're looking for tenderness. Get your tenderness right. Once your tenderness is right, let that baby rest. And let it rest, and then you can finish it off whatever. Don't put any sauce on the damn thing till you're ready to serve it. Don't be
right.
You can back to briskets and pork. A lot of guys, they'll be spraying and basting. Every time you open that damn cooker lid, you're just adding time. Right?
Just let it go.
Let it go. It's okay to it's okay to take a peek every once in a while. But I see some guys that have the cooker open more than they got it closed. I'm like, well, you just added 4 hours to your cook time because I know you're curious, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, jackassing around. You're exactly right. So anyway, I think that's backyard barbecue is simple.
And the biggest thing of it
Emma, do you think it's simple?
Yeah.
I mean, I think if someone had the patience to do it, yeah, I don't. So,
but the biggest thing of it
might not be simple.
Everything we talked about is have fun, enjoy yourself,
have fun, enjoy the process. Right? There's like Randy and I this weekend. There'll probably while we're cooking, there'll probably be time for an adult beverage, maybe
or two.
Party on.
Yeah.
Right. But enjoy the atmosphere. Smell the smoke. Not too much smoke.
Yeah.
It's all about the experience. We cook competition barbecue every weekend. We don't do it because we like to cook barbecue. We love it for the experience. We love it for the local restaurants and being able to eat different things and just hang around with people and have fun. And that's why we do it. Any other questions you think? Random questions, Emma, before we go? Emma, you got any that?
No, I think you did a pretty good job of covering everything I have on my list. Honestly.
No, I think you forgot one thing. I think you forgot about resources. Because you're wondering.
Can you recommend resources?
From a resource. So don't believe everything you ever see on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of guys out there, I'll shout him out, but a lot of guys and gals out there, but
don't believe what?
One guy that does what? Don't believe what?
What'd she say? Don't
say that because I'm waiting for you to start doing that, and we want people to believe everything you say.
Okay,
I want you to start
you can. Randy and I disagreed. He thinks a big green egg's great. I think it's a piece. Oh, just kidding.
Fair enough.
But it's okay to disagree. But what I'm saying, exactly. But in general, from a resource standpoint, and I think Randy and I will both agree on this. I think Malcolm Reed and his How to Barbecue Right
200%
website, YouTube channel. 200% does it better than anybody out there.
Yep.
Now, Matt Pittman over at Meats Church does a great job. There's all kinds. Heath Riles does a great job. There's a bunch of people that do a great job with content. But dollar for dollar, if I'm going to go one place, I'm going to go to Malcolm Reed's How to Barbecue Right. I'm going to download the app. The damn guy's got an app on his phone or on my phone that I can say, Randy, it is amazing. I mean, the guy is just right here. How to Barbecue Right here.
And so then you put in what?
And so he's got a pictorial. So if I want to figure out how do we do brisket, right? I can type in, got a little search bar at the top because that's what we like to do, right? And here's everything you need to know about smoked brisket. And the one thing that Malcolm does, so he starts off and he tags his YouTube video. Can you guys see that? Like that?
Oh, okay.
YouTube video. So he's got a YouTube video, but then he goes through a step-by-step pictorial process. So you have a choice, and then at the bottom, he'll come up with a recipe, right? So you can look at the recipe by itself. You can look at a pictorial of through with the process, or you can just watch the video and they all say the same thing. So he's reaching every way you want to do it. And he's got a damn podcast. Maybe we should have him on sometime. Maybe we should go on his. But he probably does it as far as resources. Meathead over in Amazing Ribs has a great website out there that has a lot of information too. Randy sniffed there for some reason.
Yeah.
But just good stuff. But don't believe everything you see on the internet, right?
Huh?
I think so. Yeah, I think Malcolm's. Hopefully, he'll be here this weekend. I'm not sure if he's still cooking much or not, but
I don't think he is. I'd be surprised if he's up there.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But anyway.
Hey, you want to cook MBN?
Hey, do you want to cook MBN?
I don't care. I'll pay the entry fee.
Are you bringing a cooker?
Can't we just use some of the stuff you use?
Do I have to work?
No. The only thing we'd have to do different is you'd have to do some baby back ribs.
Where am I going to put them at?
I don't know. That's the only thing.
We'll talk about this. We could do that. We'll talk around that. Sherry, she'll scream at me, but
I know. I think it'd be funnier.
We could. I mean, we could. There's just money involved, right?
I'd pay the entry fee. And
well, the meat's the meat's the more expensive part.
Why? We would just use what you're using. We'd just use your pork. We'd use your pork for it. And I
barely got enough pork to turn in the damn contest.
Oh, okay. All right.
We'll have to talk about it, but it'd be nice if Old Hickory just hop in an Old Hickory for us right there.
Well,
drop in a whole hog and.
Oh, we don't want to do. No, they don't do whole hog anymore.
They don't?
No. Let's see. Yeah, they do whole hog. Don't they do hog, shoulder?
Yeah, they do.
Which is pulled pork or whatever, and ribs. So we could do ribs.
Don't you love our plan? Don't you love our planning that goes into this? I'm leaving tomorrow morning. To go to this contest, and Randy's going, "Hey, let's do this."
What'd be funnier than hell if we slipped in there and won the damn thing? And we could, because we're final in one of them. We would final in one of them. I'll guarantee you. And we'd just do it underneath the awning there at your trailer. Just do on
you'd
site.
Have to do all the bullshit.
I would. I mean, it'd be easy. We're just couple simple old country boys. We just decided last minute we're going to give it a try. We don't know. We really don't know what we're doing, but we're just going to give it a try. The least they know. We don't need all and use. Hell, we just go in the restaurant and get the plates and stuff. Well, no, you got to use plastic plates anyway now. You use everything's disposable now. So we could just mooch
we got some planning to do.
No, we don't.
You guys.
We just mooch off.
We just mooch off people and get what we need.
Jeez.
Okay. Well, I'd say let's get down there and have a libation on Thursday and come up with a game plan. Let's don't plan it all ahead of time.
If we need baby backs, we can just get them from Pellet.
Yeah. Right.
Just get 3 racks from Pellet. That's all we need.
Yeah.
Or we could, because if we say something to Andrew, he'll bring down a whole goddamn semi-load of them, and then we'll have to cook a bunch of them and stuff. So.
Yep, this is where it goes off the rails. We forgot that the record button's still on.
I have to pee so bad.
Okay.
And I've been waiting to close this bad boy out.
Okay.
And lucky for you guys, you guys have to stay here after we finish recording because Randy's thing's got to upload for a hot second. So you guys
don't
can talk
shut
about
it
it
off,
then.
Randy.
You have to stay here.
She's going to stop.
Nope.
Okay.
I'm going to stop the recording. We're going to leave.
Now we're going to close.
Yep.
I'm going to see if she remembers what to say, knowing she has to pee really bad.
Yeah, I do. Everybody, go follow, and subscribe to our pages. We are at Cue the Mic Podcast on Instagram, Threads, Twitter, TikTok, the whole shebang. At Cue the Mic Podcast on YouTube, where you will subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get an email every Monday when we post. And yeah.
And if you're in Central Illinois, go see Twyford BBQ and his food truck and catering.
And follow him at Twyford BBQ.
Twyford BBQ.
My favorite thing is that Randy sends me Instagram reels all the time thinking Smokey D's barbecue is Darren. So hopefully we can fix that.
Randy,
Go
I'm
Pete.
the goat of BBQ, not Smokey
Mhm.
D's.
Okay, well, whatever.
Yeah.
You should forward them.
Teach
worry.
old dog new tricks. It's all right.
Hey, you can forward me all
get
the
a cat.
Instagram reels you want, but guess what? I don't open them
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay, all right.
Exactly.
So how
Okay.
long do I
Alright.
need to stay
We
on
gotta
here?
go.
That was
don't,
it.
Don't, Randy.
Just, I'm going to finish
just-
this episode and I'll let you know.
Okay.
Okay.
Hit finish.
That was
Okay.
Cue the Mic, episode 23. We'll see you guys next week.
We're out. Bye.